Okay, greetings everybody watching and or listening to this. Welcome Simon, all the way from Byron Bay in Australia, 9 hours in the future. What's it like?
It's warm and beautiful on the east coast of Australia, and I'm honoured and privileged to be here with you, Dave, and everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, for sure. So for those who don't know, this is Simon Borg-Olivier, and we'll get into that very interesting name, which has always been a cool, a nice little historic story. Um, but yeah, Simon is a wonderful human being, and a remarkable teacher and pioneer, in my opinion, of uh, of wellness and of love and kindness and all things related to the body and the mind and yoga and movement and breathing and mindfulness and meditation and all these wonderful things. I was introduced to Simon through another close friend of ours and fellow teacher and researcher and another wonderful human being, Jim Harrington. And Jim studied with Simon and Bianca when he was in Sydney. And then Jim came across to South Africa and I met Jim and started practicing yoga synergy. And watching Simon on the DVDs and practicing along, and then as the internet became more of a thing, accessing all the kind of videos and information through there. And then finally Simon came to South Africa and it took us a while to figure this out. The first one was 2014, and met you there. And then we've got to spend a month together in India in 2015, which was a life-affirming experience. And then you came back to South Africa in 2015. And that was the last time I saw you. But
seems like yesterday.
It seems like yesterday, or it seems like this morning while I was moving and breathing. And but yeah, I mean, for anyone who's met you, your way is highly impressionable and stays with us. So like we said, it feels like yesterday, it feels like this morning. And to have you on here is really, really cool to discuss whatever it is we're going to discuss. So that's a little intro of Simon. If I was to list the amazing things that he's done, we could be here for forever. But and it's better to hear it straight from you. But before we jump into any kind of history, I'd rather just leap straight into the deep end, Simon, and put you on the spot a little bit. What do you think and feel this is all about? What is being human all about? Why are we here? What why are we having this conversation right now?
It's funny you mentioned the word yoga, and I love yoga, and I've been doing some sorts of yoga for many, many decades, but I've moved away from using the word yoga in the modern world, because if you mention the word yoga to someone and you invite them to come to a yoga class, the average stats is if you invite 200 people to come to their first yoga class, 100 people will say, no, thank you, just based on the word yoga itself, because it's got a funny reputation. For some people, it's too spiritual. Others, the modern version is not spiritual enough. For some people think it's a very stupid type of exercise. They can do better in the gym. Others are thinking it's too stretchy or too relaxing or too this or to that. So it has a funny thing. So I would like to bring well-being and health to people and to the planet. So I try not to use the word yoga unless it's someone who's actually interested in yoga already, in which case I'm quite happy to use it. But what I like is, I think, the thought that every culture, every indigenous or traditional culture in the world had something which, from my experience and observation around the world, has been pretty much similar to what India calls yoga.
Mm.
And the way I like to resonate with it is it's something like the recognition that the people of any particular country recognize that they're all connected as one family, and they're connected to the earth, they're connected to the animals, to the trees, to the birds and the bees and the earth.
Mhm.
And this idea that we have connection and that we should treat each other and the earth and the other beings, souls, animals, consciousnesses, treat everyone like we actually are connected, like a mother and a child are connected, which that method of connection, really, if you want to get the best result, is sharing good energy and loving information.
Mm.
And this is something which I think is the essence of what Indian yoga was trying to say, that
Mhm.
the word yoga itself meant union, and that in some of the Indian texts, it says that yoga is the recognition that our individual consciousness is one with the universal consciousness. I like to think of it more simply as just recognize that every person on this planet is connected as one family, that we are connected with the earth, etc. And every culture says this, but also modern physics says this,
Right.
that we're all connected, and that consciousness, it seems by modern physics, is the one all-pervading factor, that it seems that you can't observe anything in nature without actually changing it. In other words, physics accepts that the actual observation with your consciousness on anything, a particle, will actually change the nature of that particle.
Mm.
So consciousness seems to be the one thing which links everything. And so as a scientist, as a yoga practitioner, and someone who's studied cultures all over the world, I think the purpose of our existence here is, first of all, to recognize that the world is a unified place. Secondly, to actually treat other people, other consciousnesses, the world itself, and yourself as if there is connection. And so this is the ultimate purpose. So how are we going to do that?
Mm.
My purpose, I see it as being that although people might have something really deep in a past life or a future life, if such things exists, I can't prove we've had past lives or future lives, not enough to prove to other people, not even enough to prove to myself, really, if I'm honest.
Mm.
But I do know I have a current life,
Right.
and I do know that I function better, and all my friends function better, and the world tends to function better if you're actually having a good time. So I think the best way we can make the world be a better place is if every individual chooses, because it's a choice, to enjoy their lives.
Mm.
Find a way of enjoying your life. And the best way of doing that is to make sure that your body, in its various levels of physical anatomy, physiological, energetic, and mental, in terms of the emotions that we feel, the thoughts that we have, all are enjoyable.
Mm.
So I think we should enjoy our lives, look after our bodies. And once we've done that and taken care of ourselves a little bit, we can help other people enjoy their lives.
Mm.
And if you help other people enjoy their lives, and you've started by doing it yourself as a good model, then you can start actually doing what I was saying before, sharing good energy and loving information in the world. But the essence of physical yoga, or we could call it simply posture, movement, breathing, and mental control in any form from any of the cultures around the world, including once you talked to me about the Kalahari Bushmen
Mm.
and their breath control and movement exercises,
Mm.
then what we're trying to do on a personal level is trying to move good energy and loving information inside ourselves. So our individual cells, of which there might be 50 to 100 trillion individual cells inside ourselves, which all have their own individual consciousness, will actually resonate with each other and treat each other in a way which expresses the sharing of good energy and loving information, the way that's expressed in the yamas and niyamas of modern yoga, the
Right.
same way that a mother will treat a young baby who she knows she's connected to.
Mm.
And the way we do that physically in the body is by encouraging blood flow and by encouraging a dominance of the parasympathetic nervous system, that which is the state of rest, rejuvenation, relaxation, regeneration, and putting this flow of good energy, good circulation, and loving information, this dominant parasympathetic nervous system state, through a body which is kept stable and structurally sound, and you don't let the body atrophy. You make sure you look after your muscles and joints and
Mm.
structure and function. And that's a simple way of summarizing, I think, what I'm trying
Simple.
to do.
Done. Well, we can end the podcast now. Wonderful.
Enough. I could tell you how to do it, of course,
Well, this
but
is
that's a
the
concept.
thing, because I mean, it is really that simple. I can't imagine why anyone would disagree with that, unless they were potentially suffering from some kind of disorder, which is completely natural and normal as well. Um, but and I'm reading a fantastic book now, by do you know Franz de Waal, the primatologist?
I've
You
heard of them.
you might have seen some of his videos. You would love it. This one in particular is called The Bonobo and the Atheist. It's
Sounds good.
fantastic, and he's also very well known for Our Inner Ape. That was a really big one, and Age of Empathy. But basically,
Mhm.
he's just saying that all these things that you just described and explained are completely innate and inherent. Um, the things like empathy and compassion and kindness and love, this understanding of connection, um, is completely natural and is um, an intricate part of evolution, um, and is wired into us. And at the same time, he's also saying that competition, violence, uh, dissonance, is also a part of our nature. Um, what is, of course, the interesting thing about humans is that we have this ability to reflect on these things and make conscious choices. Um, so this is where, of course, it becomes tricky, because there's no doubt that we want connection, we want to get along, we want peace, we want goodness for people. But it seems like, depending on where you look, and if you look at your own life, if you look outside, um, there's a lot of disconnection, there's a lot of pain, there's immense suffering, there's um, a lot of confusion, and that can be overwhelming, and it can seem incredibly unfair and unjust, and um, yeah, and then it doesn't become so simple. It becomes, now it's very complicated. Now I'm very confused. Now I'm very scared.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I mean, why do you think that happens? Why do you think there is that idea of connection and love and understanding is so obvious? It's so simple. Why does it get so confusing? Why do why does it feel like it's the opposite sometimes?
I think it's the state of the world really confuses people. I think that because of our history, which really is uncertain. I mean, they say that history is written by the victors,
Mm,
which, victors implies there's been wars and there's been hundreds. I mean, there's 100 or 200 going on right now, as far as I recall, but there's been hundreds going on in all the history that we know, which really means that if history is really written by the victors, and certainly we've seen that around the world in the time I've been alive, therefore that most of our history is completely uncertain.
mm,
So we have really no idea what went on in the past, not even 150 years ago, let alone going back 2,000 years. But what we do see is a world right now where many people are being influenced by a mainstream media which tends to thrive and earn most of its money on just spreading fear.
mm,
And so the fear, which is spread through even things like when you go to an airport and there are people with guns who want to search you, and you've got stories in your head about what happens sometimes when police or other people will plant something on you, and someone might have inadvertently stuck something on you. And so
sure.
invariably when you go to a place where there's security, even if you're completely innocent, you feel like you could be found guilty.
Mm.
So there's always this threat that we're facing when we go to a public place where there's any security. We always feel threat when we are turning on the news. I mean, did you turn on the news the other night and heard that there was a family in South America who all the father, the mother, and the three children all reached enlightenment and are born blissfully happily? That sort of news doesn't come on, that you only get news about rapings and killings and murderings and wars and terrorist attacks. That's what makes the news. So people turn on the news, which they're constantly doing. Most people are constantly turning on their news and finding just things that are going to inflame their nervous system and put people into a state of flight or fight.
Mm.
And for those listening to this who don't know the basics of the nervous system, if I revise it, maybe
Yeah,
then I can make
please.
my point
Sure.
clearer. So we have the conscious nervous system called somatic nervous system, the unconscious nervous system called autonomic nervous system. And supposedly the autonomic nervous system is that which the conscious mind cannot control. Although when I first read about this in my first biology textbook at high school, it said the autonomic nervous system, brackets which cannot be controlled by the conscious mind, new brackets, except by some Indian yogis, it said, which always fascinated me. The unconscious nervous system, autonomic nervous system, has got two well-known components, one of which is called the sympathetic nervous system, the other one called the parasympathetic. And the lay person's way of saying, euphemistic way of saying sympathetic nervous system is the flight or fight response, aka flight, fight, fear, freeze response. And the parasympathetic nervous system is also called the relaxation response, or the fuller name, I call it rest, relaxation, rejuvenation, regeneration mode of the body, the mode which we should be in most of the time. And for most people, they would have heard about the sympathetic nervous system or the flight, fight, fear, freeze response when they were at high school, and they would have heard about it in the context of saber-toothed tigers, when the primitive cave person was, foraging for food to bring back to its cave family. It might have come across occasionally a saber-toothed tiger, which was existing at the time, and the saber-toothed tiger could attack them. They have a choice of either fighting the tiger or running away from the tiger. And if they were to do this, they would turn on their flight or fight response,
Mm.
which would allow them to put all their energy into fighting or running away.
Mm.
And so that would, of course, turn off all their non-essential functions, such as immunity, digestion, reproduction, because you don't need to heal the common cold or, have sexually functional reproductive system or even, a good digestive system if all you're doing is putting your energy into fighting or running away.
Right.
So most people hear it, they listen to it, and they go, yes, but now there are no saber-toothed tigers. But I go, I have saber-toothed mortgage over me. I have saber-toothed relationships. I have two little buggers of saber-toothed children who harass me on a daily basis. Most of our life, is fighting these imaginary saber-toothed tigers.
Right.
And the imaginary world of stress and fear is actually interpreted by your body no less realistically than real external threats. And people can work this out for themselves. Your body responds to reality no different to imagined reality. Because if you come across some really delicious food and you put it in front of your mouth starts to water. But anyone listening to this talk right now could try this experiment where if you close your eyes and you imagine your most favorite food, and you imagine with your mind's eye you see it, then you imagine with your mind's nose that you're smelling it, then you imagine with your mind's hand you're picking it up, imagine you put it in your mind's mouth, now chew it with your imaginary mind's teeth. And as you chew it, your mouth start to salivate.
Mm.
And that saliva is not coming out of a real event in your life. It's coming out of the imagination. And so much of our responses, which can be any part of our autonomic nervous system or our automatic nervous system, will respond not out of a true reality, but what we perceive reality to be. So if you're believing, say, for example, that there's a virus out there right now which could kill you, then you're going to put yourself into a state of fear. My suggestion for the world right now is don't be scared of anything. Because if there is really something to be scared of, then deal with it. But if it's only something you imagine because someone told you, maybe take precautionary steps, but don't be fearful. Because fear is the thing that basically is ruining the ability to share loving information and good
Right.
energy inside yourself. It retards blood flow, it makes the heart rate increase, it causes sympathetic nervous system overload, and it turns off your system, which encourages healthy immunity, healthy digestion to absorb nutrients, eliminate toxins, and also it destroys and inhibits your reproductive system, which not only means that you won't have good sex and won't be able to have children, but your reproductive system, much more importantly, is that part of your autonomic or automatic nervous system which allows your cells to regenerate, to reproduce. So
Mm.
you can be 80 years old and have skin like a baby. And you can be 90 or 100 years old and still be regenerating brain cells,
Right.
as opposed to most people who look fit at 50 maybe, but actually have skin like leather, and who get to 60 and they can't even remember their name.
Mm.
Many people are having this loss of function that they're actually not able to regenerate themselves.
Mm.
And of course,
And
if you're in a dominant state of flight, fight, or fight, just 10 seconds more,
yeah, yeah.
the dominant subconscious emotions will be fear, anger, aggression, lack of safety, lack of trust in everything around you. And that's what brings the discontinuity. If people are feeling this inside themselves, lack of trust from one cell to another, then they're not going to be able to trust their people around them.
Mm.
They're going to be fearful of everyone around. They won't feel safe. What
Mm.
we want is to feel inside ourselves parasympathetic dominance, and the subconscious emotions will be peace, love, safety, sense of trust, sense of connection.
Mm.
You feel that in yourself, you're much more likely to share that message with the world. So
Mm.
our world is being dominated by, possibly most importantly, the monetary system of the world, the mainstream media that's pushing fear onto people, and that's making their bodies react the way it is. And the second thing that's doing this, which is probably equally worse in terms of our context, is the way most people try and improve their health. They are doing exercise. And the exercise they think they're doing is meant to keep them healthy. But most people's exercise is associated with making their heart rate increase,
Mm.
their breath increase, their minute ventilation. They're causing themselves to stretch and change their body, which is basically all of those things will put people into a further state of
Yeah.
flight or fight.
Yeah.
So we need to rethink the way we move and the way we use posture movement and
Totally.
breathing, less stressful as
And
well.
and I mean, it's the sense. It heightens the sense of competition, you know. And like,
Yes,
I'm doing
yes.
this for to achieve
Mm.
something, and I'm going to do it at all costs.
Yes, actually, can I say one more thing about in terms of your last question?
Yeah,
It's these
of course.
three dominant paradigms that we have in our modern Western technological world that I think need to be shaken out. One of them is this mentality people have of no pain, no gain.
Mm.
That has to go.
Yeah.
Another one is this Darwinian idea of survival of the fittest,
Mm.
which I believe was partly a political thing, because now we know that nature works not by survival of the fittest, but nature works by symbiosis and by
Exactly.
cooperation.
And if I
So
could
the
just add
notion of,
on to that
yes,
quickly, Simon, that there's a huge misinterpretation as well of that. That was Darwin who said that. Charles Darwin never said that. And
exactly. It was a political statement.
his message is what I'm talking about. I mean, we must acknowledge competition and violence and these kinds of things in the natural world. The natural world is brutal as
And
much as it is
yes,
life-giving. But
yes,
um,
yeah.
yeah, that just that little side note there for people who, because Charles Darwin gets a really bad rap, and he never said that.
Yes, exactly. But the world made him say that. The world attributes it to him. But in
Exactly.
fact, it was a political statement which was to justify the politics of the invading Raj countries at the time, such as England and Portugal and Spain and France, who were taking over cultures, such
Yeah.
as indigenous cultures all over the world, and justifying it with this survival of the fittest.
Yeah. Yeah. On this idea of faster, harder, stronger, better, you
Yes,
know.
yes.
Yeah.
And then on
So
top of
no
that,
pain, no gain, the
yes,
survival of the fittest, and
yes. And the third one is this ethic, which is a part of the dogma of many religions, that if you struggle now, you'll achieve a better life in the future.
yeah,
That if you're good, you're going to go to heaven. If you're bad, you're going to go to hell. And bad means there's no free lunch. You have to work. You have to suffer. It's this misunderstanding of the word tapas, which is meant to be to suffer. whereas tapas in an Indian Sanskrit word is to me more to be passionate about your work, perhaps.
Mm.
And along with that also is even, the Hindu concept in the modern system of birth, death, and rebirth, where you might think that if you do struggle enough in this life, you'll be reborn into a higher
Yeah,
status.
right.
But if you don't work hard enough, it's this punishment reward system,
Yeah. Original
that we
kind of as well.
original said, it's this mentality of treating adults like they're kids.
Yeah.
You know, you can treat a kid with a bit of punishment reward. Like, for example, I know that if my child is approaching the street, when that maybe my kids were like 1 or 2 years old, they start to walk on a street. You don't tell them the truth. You don't calmly say, darling, stop now. If you walk on the street, the big car going vroom vroom will maybe run you over and you'll go splat and die.
Mm.
That doesn't make sense to a child. It's much easier to, when they get closer to the road, to just grab them, yank them, maybe give them a tiny slap on their back and go, don't.
Mm.
And they associate with going on the road with don't.
Mm.
And so that little punishment reward, or make them do something, it's a simplistic way of treating children. But to have adults who are told, don't kill people, otherwise we'll put you in jail. I
Mm.
mean, are people really not killing because they're scared of jail, or people don't kill because they know it's just not the right thing to do?
Yeah.
We don't need to be threatened with either punishment or offered rewards to be good people. We
Right.
do it because we're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And so this mentality of the religious idea of, if you're good, you're going to go to heaven. If you're bad, you're going to go to hell. Or if you're good, you're going to come back in a high caste, bad, low caste. It's like, this is part of the dogma of trying to take adults and treat them like idiots.
Yeah. And
And we
it's
don't need that.
no, and it's an absolute form of control, and
It's a form of control.
that was used by the same the people with the same agenda that was spreading that kind of survival of the fittest,
Yeah.
because then
Yeah. And then,
you just operate on autopilot, for the greater
yes,
good.
for the greater good. You're doing it because the people in charge, who are supposed to be representatives of God in some way, like the king and the queen are thought of as representatives of God. And so the heads of state are also representatives of those kings and queens, which are
Yeah.
representatives of God. So by actually following the system of hierarchical authority, people think that they're doing the right thing, even if it may go against their wishes. And even if it makes them suffer, it's okay, because there is no free lunch.
Mm, mm, mm.
Whereas actually there is a free lunch. Free energy is available for us. If you actually just enjoy your life and look after your body and help other people enjoy their lives, things come to you. Everything feels good.
Yeah. I also
Yeah.
equate, those three things that you mentioned. It reminds me of, yeah, it's basically like, I find that way of thinking is very much about living a life of meaning and purpose, and like
Purpose.
and you'll do anything to like make that happen. Whereas I find that if you're living a life of fulfillment, then it doesn't like it. You're fulfilled. You're not striving for this,
The purpose is the
ideal that.
fulfillment. Yes,
Well,
yes.
exactly, and that's how you. Yeah.
I think people, we have seen from psychological studies all over the world, that people who have a purpose in life are healthier, they work better, they have better relationships, they have better life expectancy.
Mm,
And many people, the ones who have purpose, often have religious purpose. And they
right.
feel their life is for the purpose of what their particular God or theism or whatever cultural thing has told them to be. But if someone is an atheist, you can't convince them to believe in God.
Mm,
So rather than even try or even bring my personal beliefs into it, it's better to give someone a purpose which they can actually find to be tangible.
right.
And so the tangible purpose I like to give to people who may not have religion or not is to say, look, do you recognize that you're connected to your mother? Yes. Your parents? Yes. Did they have a mother? Did they have parents? can you possibly extend that to recognize that every person on this planet is connected? Could you appreciate that if your mother and you are connected and she loves you and you love her, which maybe doesn't happen all the time, but it did happen a little bit for once when you were first born, could that be something that could be spread into the world? In which case, purpose of our life is to appreciate that
Yeah.
connection and do something to make it amplified. Then
So
you have a purpose.
yeah,
Recognize we're connected, do something about it to make it resonate.
yeah.
And it's a
And
rational, tangible purpose.
absolutely. I mean, Franz de Waal in this book as well, he says, he's talking about, yeah, I mean, very much similar things. And he was saying that a lot of people think that we have, along with that kind of, again, it's not Darwin, but that idea of survival of the fittest, that humans have, risen to the top of the food chain, or whatever you want to call it, through force and willpower and through war, through conquering.
Yes, yeah.
And he is kind of shattering that illusion by talking about bonobo chimpanzees. Not bonobo chimpanzees, bonobos that are, they're completely different to chimpanzees. They're their own species, and that, their like philosophy is make love. That's how they resolve conflict. Bonobos, that's how they resolve all their communal conflict, is through literal. They have other ways of doing it, but they're very well known for solving problems, within their communities, through reproduction. And he
Makes
was just
sense.
saying, we have, don't think that we have outwarred other species. We've outbred them through making love, and it shows in our
Interesting.
in our genes, that we have, all these different genetic codes of all these other primates within us. And it wasn't through this, kind of stereotypical generalization of like conquering and, wielding the sword. And so, yeah, there's definitely that connection. And another thing I was thinking of while you were talking about the nervous system is, for the people who don't know, you've because a lot of the time what we're talking about is like bridging gaps, bridging where there is apparent disconnection and apparent suffering. It's like, well, or a problem or conflict, how can we resolve it? How can we come back to homeostasis or balance or nurturing and kindness and love? And you've studied thoroughly in the Western sense. You've got a master's in physiotherapy, what is it in molecular biology? Also a
I
master's?
actually have my master's in molecular biology and
Ah,
human biology, and I have a bachelor of science and a bachelor of applied science in physiotherapy as well.
right.
So all
Um,
these things, yeah.
and then, from a young age, you've been exposed to, you were taught various different types of breathing techniques and these kinds of
Yeah,
things.
from when I was about 6 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that story in a bit. We'll get to it on the ship to Australia via South Africa.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, you've studied, in depth Western science, and then of course you've dedicated your life to al- al- yeah, alternative is such a strange word that we use here, because whose
Hmm.
alternative is it?
Yes.
um,
Yes.
but alternative practices, um, from various different cultures, and your offering in yoga synergy, the word itself synergy and the word itself yoga, having this idea of culmination and of synchronicity, and not synchronicity, of synchronizing, of bringing together, of of bridging this gap, of creating something new potentially um, from what you've learned in the past. um, I find that act is very, yeah, I mean, it's highly creative, and it's admirable, and it's daunting, and um, it's beautiful. But basically, if I was to summarize it into a question, is that you've found the need or the importance of bringing things together, if that makes sense. Um,
Mhm.
like, does it make sense? Am I barking up the
Oh
right?
yeah. No, I'm trying as much as possible to bring things together, and the fusions that we've tried to do have been to try and understand traditional wisdom in terms of the way people have used, well, I could call it posture, movement, breathing, mental control, but with that mental control comes ritual and stuff like this,
Mm,
comes also dietary practices and things like this from all over the world, and trying to work out how cultures, which are traditional cultures, have worked to create homeostasis in their world and their culture, and how modern science has created the amazing things of modern medicine, especially surgical medicine, which is pretty special.
yeah.
You know, I mean, without modern surgery, many people would have died. The other parts of modern medicine, with lots of drugs and stuff like that, I'm not that particularly fond of. But you
Mm,
know, obviously, to learn how to use anesthetics has been very, very useful. So certainly, Western medicine has given a lot to us.
mm,
But to try and find a way of merging the understanding of traditional wisdom and modern Western science, and bringing them together.
mm.
You know, one of my favorite books when I was growing up was by Fritjof Capra, called The Tao of Physics.
Oh wow.
And this was a very formative book for me. I think it was written in 1970s, and I probably read it in that time. And it has three parts. The first part talks about the theories of modern physics. And the second part talks about Eastern mysticism. It talks about Buddhism, Hinduism, you know, the cultures of Japan and Thailand and stuff like this, Chinese mythology as well. And then the third part of the book talks about the parallels between them.
Right.
And modern physics and traditional wisdom are really saying exactly the same thing.
Sure. Sure.
And so to really appreciate this is something which a modern physicist will do, a traditional movement specialist will do, but somehow modern medicine is still stuck in a reductionist world, a mechanistic reductionist world.
Mm,
And when we look at what the essence of modern Western science is, the root of all modern Western science is physics. And physics is saying exactly the same as Eastern mysticism.
mm,
But from physics, we got chemistry. Chemistry is a little bit more reductionist than physics is. Then from chemistry, we got biochemistry, and they try and break things into parts even more. From biochemistry, we came to biology, and biology is even more reductionist. And then from biology, we came to the most reductionist thing of all, which was medicine. And medicine will try and tell us that we are the sum of our parts and no greater than them. And this modern medicine, I mean, not there are modern medical people who believe that there is a little bit more,
mm,
but at the root of most medical science, there are still scientists who I've met, people I worked with, who said, yes, we understand that if I could take all your molecules and I could reduce you to your molecular state, Dave, and then take all those molecules and I learned how to reconstruct them exactly to the same physical shape you've got now, you'd be standing in front of me with all the thoughts that you've got right now. And somehow what you think of as your consciousness is just an expression of the molecular interactions and the subparticulate interactions in your body, that
mm,
you are no more than the sum of your parts. Many modern scientists still believe this.
mm,
And I have trouble believing this.
mm.
I have trouble believing this. And I put a lot of credence to some of my mentors, people who I've met and really love, one of whom is Rupert Sheldrake,
Oh yeah.
who wrote these amazing
Biomimicry.
books. biomimicry and the theory of habits and stuff like this,
Mm.
of morphogenetic fields and how they affect people. And his most recent book was the Science Delusion, where he talks about the 10 dogmas of science,
Mm.
things such as that the body's a mechanistic thing and only mechanistic medicine works. Things such as conscious mind is actually residing just in the brain, whereas actually we know from studies that it goes outside our brain, like
Right.
this. And so these things that modern science, modern medicine is built on are all based on a bunch of, he calls them 10 assumptions. And they're only assumptions. And if
Mm.
you take them away, you go, actually, to believe in modern science is actually no more valid, probably, than to believe that the world was created in a garden and, 4,000 years ago. It's no less scientifically valid when you really look at how science is based. Because if something is based on just an assumption, then everything after that assumption is questionable.
Yeah, sure.
And so Rupert Sheldrake, has actually put all those things into question. It's very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I still am a scientist and I try and follow things and I love logic, but logic is only as useful as the first thing that you create it with.
Right. Yeah. And it's this again, it's this kind of fine balance or coming together of logic and then just life as it's happening and unfolding, which it seems almost inexplicable when you're just I mean, we could do it right now, but when you think of that, what is making all of this possible? And you can logically go through, everything. Okay, I'm David, and I'm sitting here, and Simon's in Australia, and through the cables and the da 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 da, da, and we're having this conversation. But there's something very grounding and embodied about just how we manage and how we live on a day-to-day basis. That is really what people are looking for. All these grand ideas and all these findings and research and from all the different cultures all over the world, these huge philosophies and are wonderful and they're fantastic. But it's like people really at the end of the day just want to, can I wake up and feel good and connect with other people and make a difference and maybe contribute a little bit of something to someone,
Have some
and
purpose. Yeah.
yeah, and go to bed at night and sleep.
Yeah. That's
uh,
what people want.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. um,
People want to have a purpose in their life, and they're only going to be able to achieve that purpose if they're physically well. If someone is feeling not well, they can't do anything. And the three components we have to look at are people's body, which has three main components if I reduce it: their physical body, which is their muscles and joints and their aspects of strength, flexibility, and functional ability to move around the world; then their physiological body, which is their energy levels, their blood flow, their nervous system, their immune system, digestive, reproductive system; and their mental body, which is their ability to think clearly, to focus, to be logical, and also to have as their default mental state the ability to choose happiness as their default mental state. And so looking at health in people and well-being, you have to address all three bodies. And it's only when people have health on a physical, physiological, mental level that they're going to be able to help other people. Because if
yeah.
someone is sick physically or physiologically or mentally, they're not going to help other people because they're just having to just deal with themselves.
Mm,
And they can give a little bit of help. Maybe their body doesn't work well, but they can sit in a chair and type a computer. But they do a better job if they could also be able to exercise and move.
mm,
Maybe someone is physically well, but energetically they've got no energy. An energetic problem is worse than a physical problem because you can't do anything with it. But the worst problem is a mental problem.
yeah.
A mental problem is something where some people will give you sympathy. He's stressed, he's depressed. As soon as you start having a mental problem that causes you to be abusive to other people because you're either forgetful, you've forgotten your job, you got delirious, you caused damage, you were spaced out and injured someone, or because you were angry or aggressive, no one has sympathy with you. And it's the worst possible injury is a mental problem. That's the worst possible sickness, yet it's the one that most people give the least sympathy for.
Yeah.
And so to make sure your mind is healthy is paramount for our health.
Yeah.
But what makes the mind healthy is by making sure the nervous system is healthy. And how do you make the nervous system healthy? You have to connect with your physical body first.
Mm.
And how are you going to do that intelligently? And you know, it's all an interconnected thing. But
Yeah, totally. Yeah, what you know mentioned about mental health or mental well-being is it's so it's such a realization to have when you see how we condemn, you know, and punish uh, people who have disorders and have done, you know, things that are terrible things, but people don't understand mental health well enough. People don't understand the, you know, the neurophysiology of the brain and the nervous system, you know, what a person was going through in order to make
make them do what
those,
they did.
to do what they did,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
And when you
Yeah.
understand that, you're like, well, okay, geez, well, maybe we need to find another way instead of just sentencing this person to whatever,
Yeah.
or condemning them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
punishing them, because that's not going to solve the problem, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, people have a problem with their mental state, which is they think of it as their conscious mental state, but actually what's driving most people's unhappiness is their unconscious.
Mm,
And so within us, we have a set of programs which run our daily life. And so it seems like about 95% of our day is run by unconscious programs. And only for 5% of the day are we living actually consciously.
right.
And because of these unconscious programs, people do things that other people don't like, their behaviors other people don't like. And most people in their conscious mind would not do things to really upset other people. But
Mm.
they're often choosing patterns of behavior which have been programmed into them from a very early age, uh, in possibly negative
Before they were
ways
even
through
born as
perhaps,
well,
possibly even before they're
in terms of
born, you know, even in the
genetics and
womb
this
or
kind of
before
thing.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, perhaps. And so one of the most important things we can do, and traditional cultures have done with things like posture, movement, breathing, mental control, and even dietary control, is to do things for people that can help them reprogram their unconscious mind
Mm,
and get them out of this overly dominant state of flight or fight,
mm,
which is causing them to be angry at people or stressed or
mm,
depressed, which is causing their immune system to turn off, which then causes their body to start to atrophy, etc. And so how do we do this? Well, you know, you and I have talked at length about posture, movement, breathing, and mental control in the past, and that's what we use as our modality. So one of the things that I think is most important to see with this is that there are these places in the body that we can go to that can help people access their unconscious. And often people talk about breathing as being a really important modality. And many people talk about yoga in terms of being something which, unless you're breathing properly, you're not really doing yoga. Or breathing is the link between conscious and unconscious. Or
mm.
breathing is the link between body and mind, but it's not the breathing.
Yeah.
It is this important muscle in the body, which is the diaphragm,
Mm,
which is something which you can control consciously. We can choose to breathe into our abdomen, or when you're asleep in your most regenerative mode, you're breathing diaphragmatically. So
mm.
what makes the breathing special is not the air going in and out, it's our access to the diaphragm. So one of the things that people could do a little bit more to try and get out of that state of flight or fight and re-regulate, reset their nervous system is to take a gentle diaphragmatic breath into their abdomen and then just gently let the air out passively. But the good thing is that's not where it ends. There are 11 other places in the body where we have dual control, both conscious and unconscious
Mm,
access to these parts of the body. And so the diaphragm is one of them, but also we have control through our jaw, our lips, the outer eyes that make us blink, the inner eyes that make us eyes roll, our salivary apparatus, like I was talking about before, and our ability to swallow, the pelvic floor, and it's, you know, the anus, the urethra, and the perineum. Also, surprisingly, our fingers, our toes, and our neck. So these 12 places which have dual control, both conscious and unconscious control, if you control those in your practice of posture, movement, and breathing,
yeah.
you'll find that you can automatically get from a state of stress to a state of relaxation
Mm.
and change your mental mode.
Yeah.
Instead of feeling stressed and being angry at everyone around you, or feeling depressed and miserable and no purpose in your life, you can suddenly start to feel happy with your environment, happy with your internal environment, because you
Totally.
control your environment, and then start to treat other people the way you're treating yourself.
Yeah.
This is one way. I think it's really important to acknowledge that our purpose on a physical level when we're dealing with ourselves is to rewrite the unconscious programs
Mm.
that have been drilled into us by the mainstream media, by our upbringing, by the education system, which is very questionable. And so the ways we do it are, one, by accessing these 12 bridges between conscious and unconscious. Two, a very important method is to access our spinal reflexes, which are so integrated with our fight or flight response. And this comes with the way we move. And then three is to also access the ability to move blood inside our body without the heart racing, because
Mm.
there's this dominant paradigm that says the way we should improve our health is to get the heart rate up. But actually, it's about the cardiovascular system. Good health is good cardiovascular flow, but without the heart rate increasing. So I talk about 11 other ways other than the heart to make blood flow through your body.
Mm.
And they are parts of the secrets of internal hatha yoga, that they're also the secrets of the way internal systems that can be accessed by traditional cultures, why, Tibetan, Chinese, Indian yogis can sit naked in the snow, while indigenous Australians and Africans can also sit in very cold climates and reduce their body temperature and access their
Mm.
unconscious. These things, regulation of blood flow and the control of the autonomic nervous system, are really important for our ability to change our mindset.
Totally.
And another one that's also very important is the access to our brain, because our brain has a left and right side brain. The left side brain is more associated with the sympathetic nervous system, right side brain more parasympathetic. Left nostril goes to right brain, right nostril to left brain, left eye to right brain, right eye to left brain, etc. So what we want to create balance is to make sure that when we're doing things, we're always able to see them with both eyes, not with
Mm.
one. So, for example, many kids at school will stuff up their whole future by sitting on one side of the room always. And they're only ever seeing things with their right eye,
Mm.
which means it's only the right eye that's being stimulated going to their left brain, which means their right brain is not being stimulated at
Mm.
all. Other
Mm.
people sit on the other side of the room, they're only going for the left eye, stimulating right brain, and they have no logic. Many people do this at lectures. They watch television like this. They sit and talk to people like this
Yeah.
in their life. I tell all my students in all my classes, as you've seen, that everyone must come in a semicircle facing me, and they all must look at me with both eyes.
Mm.
And also, to balance this, when you're teaching someone new, be it posture, movement, breathing, mental control, or even a task, it's really important you access both sides of the brain. So, for example, maybe you explain the task to them, and that accesses their left brain, more the thinking part, but then you make them feel the task. So they
Mm.
feel it with their right brain. They actually maybe watch you do it, or you lead them through it tactilely. And by learning things with both sides of the brain, then it's when you're accessing both sides of the brain at the same time that you have the possibility of rewriting unconscious programs, which is what happened when you're up to about 7 years old, and people were living in this place. So these
Yeah.
are part of the tricks, part of the systems which I found are most helpful to get people out of this really ingrained thought that they have to live with no pain, no gain, flight or fight, and this idea that they have to suffer to get anywhere in life.
Yeah.
We have to reprogram these things in people's
Totally.
life, and
I
posture,
mean,
movement, and breathing can.
I remember the first time I ever heard you say those things, and I did them in terms of going through those spaces, which it's changed my teaching forever as well, and changed my practice obviously forever. And I just felt this overwhelming sense of connection and balance and calm. Not like I say overwhelming. It wasn't. It was a little bit euphoric, but it wasn't like
Not
uh,
spaced out euphoric.
not
It's a
spaced
clear
out, just
euphoria.
incredibly grounded and
Yes,
like, whoa, I'm
yes, yeah,
here, and
yeah,
my blood
yeah,
is
yeah.
moving, and I'm breathing, and I'm like, I'm doing
Connected.
things I've never done before. I'm
Mm.
thinking in ways I've never thought before, but I'm not getting carried
Yes,
away, but I'm feeling
yeah,
highly
yeah.
empowered. And I was like, this is real, man. And it's tangible, it's here and now. I mean,
Mm.
we could do it right now, everybody just feel your toes, feel your fingertips, relax them, relax your
mm,
pelvic floor, relax your belly, let
mm,
it push out slightly, relax your jaw. It might
mm,
be clenching,
mm,
and just take a deep breath and relax. And it's like, oh,
mm,
I'm I'm here. And
yes, yeah.
I'm not in the projected fearful future, and I'm not holding on to the regrettable past.
Yes,
I'm
yeah.
not being
Yes,
torn and
yeah.
in two by these unconscious processes. And um
I think that's a good thing what you said just then, that, the two biggest problems in the psychological framework of the mind is stress and depression. And most people are neither stressed nor depressed, they're both, which
yeah,
is almost like a PTSD situation.
yeah,
And so, the stress is usually a fear for what's going to happen in the future. The depression is usually a regret for what happened in the past. So to eliminate these possibilities, be here, be
yeah,
now. And
yeah.
what's the best way of being here and now is get out of your head, get into your body.
Mm, mm.
And so by
Totally.
touching these places, like you said, these bridges between conscious and unconscious, get people to relax these parts, but not just relax them, because often it's hard to touch a place. So
Mm,
move the fingers,
mm,
move the shoulders, move your neck just a little bit, not to stretch it. Move your jaw a bit, chew a bit, move your lips, make
mm,
some saliva, swallow it, blink a few times, make your eyes move left or right. These things reset the nervous system straight
mm,
away.
mm.
Breathe into your abdomen. Funny, you said deep breath, but often the
Yeah,
layperson, when you say a deep breath,
we'll
they
do a
take the breath of the
chest.
chest.
Yeah, yeah,
Whereas deep is like, I always imagine, say we're sitting in a pool of water, a swimming pool, and the water comes up to our nose. So if you breathe deep, deep in the water is not your chest, deep is your pelvic floor, deep
mm,
is your feet. But
mm.
often people think deep breath is, but usually a chest breath for most people is a stressful breath that they can
Yeah.
only do by inhibiting their diaphragm.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and that then spikes the heart rate even more,
Yes.
and perpetuates that flight or
And it's
fight.
and it's interesting with breathing, because if you say to people, do a few deep long breaths, because a lot of the world of fitness is surrounded with this idea to get your heart rate up, breathe more. And they say you should breathe more, you should get your heart rate up. But when people do it, the heart rate elevation stimulates the fight or flight response,
Mm,
and so does the breathing more than normal stimulate a fight or flight response. And many people who do these exercises where they get their heart rate up, they breathe more, they stretch, they tense muscles, they're getting a stimulation of the fight or flight response, which secretes in the body adrenaline and cortisol, which are a
mm.
little bit like coffee and cocaine. They're also secreting endorphins when you're in state of fight or flight, which is a bit like the body's heroin. And they're also, with overbreathing, if overbreathing is forced, and it is in most people,
Mm.
hyperventilation leads to reduced blood flow to the brain. And when you've got less going on in the brain because less blood flow, some people enjoy it because they can't think as clearly. It's a bit like
Yeah,
marijuana.
yeah,
So many people who are doing overstretching, overtensing, overbreathing, overthinking, which is most people's exercise, they go, yeah, I feel really amazing. I'm on a runner's high. I'm on a yogic high. I'm on a pranic high. I feel incredible. You go, no, you're just spaced out on the body's own caffeine, cocaine, marijuana, and heroin at the same
yeah,
time.
yeah,
That's not the grounded state we're looking for. We're looking to be energized, calm, focused, grounded,
yeah,
not spaced out,
yeah,
totally clear, peaceful, and warm.
yeah. And I mean, this was, I mean, for me, this is when I started working with Jim, and then being, introduced to you, and it really was a revelation. And I was like, these myths, like, these people aren't just saying this so that I believe them. This actually this is actually a thing. And like, you look back and I'm like, wow, my entire, well, not my entire, but a lot of my life was based on these myths. And
Yes.
I just finished a fantastic little book that I'd highly
Mm.
recommend, uh, Sam Harris's Free Will. Um, and he's talking about exactly what we're talking about now, in terms of, these unconscious processes that are happening, and what can we do to at least become aware of them, and then to start to make some conscious responses, rather than just living in this feedback loop of unconscious reaction that just perpetuates itself. Um, and is just exhausting, because
Yeah.
of course all
Yeah.
these things, these highs then crash into the lows. I mean, burnout has become, one of the most common
Ubiquitous.
things, for people. Like, oh yeah, I really smashed it, but then, for the next month
Burnt
or
out.
even longer, or what's the chronic fatigue? What is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Chronic fatigue.
And,
Yeah.
so it's why do you think it's so hard for people to, and I say people, including ourselves, to make that change, to really break those habits? And you mentioned Rupert Sheldrake's work on habit, but why do you think it's so difficult to do that, to come out of that and then into something new?
Well, look, I think there are many reasons, but we're driven to have a basic survival instinct.
Mm,
And in the modern world, the survival instinct includes our ability to have a job, to earn money, to have a roof over our heads. And so many people, and also the ability to maybe choose a mate, to have children.
mm,
And so many people in the mating process, for example, will want to look good. And so looking good means having a healthy body.
yeah,
So often people will, try and look good by keeping their abdomen drawn in and their chest puffed up. And, this just puts people into a state of flight or fight straight away. That's just one little thing. Girls are walking around with a sucked in belly the whole
yeah,
time,
yeah,
and they're just in a total state of stress. If they relax their abdomen, they'd feel a lot less, you know, angry and aggressive.
yeah, yeah,
Men as well, trying to build up, but they're all trying to do it because they want to find a mate.
yeah,
But at the same time, those not wanting to find a mate are just trying to have a roof over their head.
yeah,
So, like as someone who teaches posture, movement, and breathing and mental control, I found over the years that, especially in this modern internet era, it's nice to have a talk with you, but if you and I put a picture of you and me talking on Instagram, for example, and there's a picture of Dave and Simon, how many people are going to click on the picture? Because the mental state of most people is 3 seconds attention span, doesn't look interesting.
yeah,
David and Simon sitting there. But if we put a picture of both of us balancing on one hand, as we've done before, everyone goes, oh, that looks interesting.
yeah,
So then to a certain extent, our physical abilities are what people actually like to see, and they give you income.
mm,
So if you have a good Instagram page, and I know many people who do, then you can very, very quickly have 300,000 followers or 1 million followers. And for people I know who have this number of followers, maybe they've only been doing physical activity for 3 or 5 years,
mm,
but they're able to walk into any city in the world
mm,
and advertise a workshop on posture, movement, breathing, call it any name at all.
right,
And they will have instantly 100 people who'll pay $100 each, and within a 2-day workshop, they walk away with $10,000 to $20,000,
yeah,
or
and,
50, no,
and
$100,000 in a couple of days.
sure, and
People like this
so
are booked up for 2 years in advance.
yeah, and it I guess it's again, it's my question with regards to why is it hard to overcome that, the unconscious narrative, is because of everything we've spoken about before, like how it's just perpetuating itself, this everywhere you
It is.
look, it's just faster, harder, smarter, stronger, leaner, cleaner, and even things that
Yes.
have, you would hope, like good intentions, have been, yeah, kind of twisted slightly to
Yes.
all
Yes.
to keep perpetuating this competitive, like,
People feel
reality.
like they're a failure unless they can actually
Yeah,
succeed physically and with connection with people. And people really do want connection. So unless they can do something which makes them attractive to other people, they won't have connection. But
mm,
unfortunately, in the modern world, there's been too much emphasis put on things which actually cause stress to create connection,
yeah, yeah,
such as your ability to look a certain way. How much emphasis is placed on how you look?
It's
you
why
know.
it's crazy. Eh? It's
It's right, very crazy. So people are using the models of what they're seeing on magazines and television, and these artificial people who, maybe nice people themselves, but they're represented as being the normal. So anyone who's slightly overweight, slightly less attractive, is feeling like a failure. And so
mm,
they're constantly trying to try and change themselves to be better, or they just give up and they just accept that they're failures. And it
yeah,
affects people tremendously.
yeah,
And then when they come to do something about their lack of ability, they often adopt movement, posture movement, breathing practices that they think are going to be quick fixes to make their body look good. And they might give them these practices might give people short-term gains in strength, flexibility, maybe weight loss, but they're paying long-term losses in terms of their immune health, digestive health, reproductive health, and mental health.
yeah, yeah.
This is not going to make them happy.
Well, yeah, which is just totally a reflection of the general kind of societal position we find ourselves in terms of it's just not sustainable. What we're doing is not sustainable, you know.
The sustainability word is a really important one, because we were talking before about the idea that people are happiest if they don't drift off to the future, which becomes stress, don't reflect too much in the past, which can become depression, but they stay in the present moment. And I reflect on the last 10 years, there's been a lot of resurgence in the study of psychedelic drugs and the possibilities they might have for helping people with depression or with
Mm,
post-traumatic stress disorders and stuff like this. And so what they found out when they studied psychedelics for the first time in 40 or 50 years, because they were studied in the 60s and stuff like
yeah,
that, then there was a ban. The last 10 years they've been studied again. And what they found was that for most people, this is studies from Johns Hopkins University, etc., in the
yeah,
United States, they found that for most people, if they gave them something like pure LSD or psilocybin or DMT or something like this, most people, after the time they were given, they didn't sort of go, I want to have that again the next day. It's not like it's an addictive drug.
mm,
Many of the people, after a sort of study which was going back over 4 or 5 years afterwards, they would say, no, I'd never want to do that again.
mm,
But they
but
said it was one of the most influential things in my life, and I'm
yeah,
really glad I did it.
yeah,
Just once was enough, and
yeah,
it changed my life.
yeah,
And then when they studied these people's brains, they found something which they hadn't found before, which was something that wasn't able to be studied 30, 40 years ago, was that these people's brains were undergoing a place of transformation where they were no longer having the activity in their, what they call the default network. And the
yeah,
default network,
yeah,
it's this place in the brain where people go to when they are just maybe waiting for a bus, which is going to come in maybe 30 seconds or maybe 30 minutes, we're not sure. So the
mm,
brain starts to drift off and it starts thinking about what you did yesterday, what you did tomorrow. It's your time traveling center that turns off. And then your default network is also when you might be thinking about your relationship with your boss or your partner or your children. It's this place which is the ego center, the place which separates you from everyone else.
mm,
That turns off. So suddenly on psychedelic drugs, you are suddenly placed in a place where there's no future, no past. You're here and now.
yeah,
And there's no sense of separation. You are totally connected. So the joke we always have with people who are on psychedelic drugs is like, look, there is no plate. I am one with the plate,
right,
like this. And that, they said, is a state which they'd never seen anywhere except for one other place. And the only other people who have this particular brainwave pattern is people who are profound and proficient meditators.
sure,
And so meditators are the people. Meditation and yoga are the same thing, but you don't have to do Indian yoga to meditate. In fact, we have athletes who go into the zone or
yeah,
into the flow state.
yeah,
You can meditate either in stationary or dynamic positions. So what really is this meditative state that can give people this profound mental state which can allow them to change their life in a positive way?
mm,
And I believe it has 5 particular features. The meditative state has, in its full form, one is it's got to be sustainable, like you were saying.
mm,
Sustainability. You can't do an activity which is unsustainable and expect to get into meditative state.
mm,
You can't do chin-ups or pull-ups and expect to meditate and then very easily. It's going to stop after 2 minutes.
mm,
Maybe some people can meditate running, but most people can't. But I've got friends who are elite athletes who can run for 10, 20 hours
yeah, yeah,
and they can achieve it. So it
mm,
has to be sustainable. Then the second thing is it has to be engaging. It must be something which your mind will find exciting enough to be interesting, but
Yeah.
not too exciting it becomes stressful,
Yeah.
and calming enough to be relaxing, but not too calming to become boring. And so it has to allow you to enter that place of being in the present moment, connected to what you're doing, an activity
Mm.
that connects you. The third thing about the meditative state, it has to have a calming response in your body. You must feel the effects of the parasympathetic nervous system dominant, not a stressful state. So the fourth thing, which means no overtension, no overstress, no heart rate increasing, no, not significantly, and no hyperventilation. And the fourth thing is it has to be effortless. You must feel like it's really easy to do. This is something I'm really good at. You know,
Mm.
there's no
Mm.
pain, no suffering, no risk of damage, no risk of threat. And the fifth most important thing is it must make your blood flow. And
Mm.
when it makes the blood flow, suddenly your finger has the same temperature as your armpit and you feel connected.
Mm. Mm.
Because real meditation is like the yogi who sits naked in the snow, and they're not meditating like most Westerners think it's easy to meditate. You just sit, close your eyes, cross your legs. But those people are not really meditating. Often they're sitting in a cold room, covering themselves with blankets because their fingers and toes are cold. That's not meditating. That's sitting in a cold room getting cold. And they're not meditating if their legs go numb because nothing gets their legs. They're not connected. Their
Right.
brain might be in a calmer state, but their body's disconnected. So
Mm.
unless you connect your brain with your body, it's not meditation. It's just turning off your mind for a little bit, or maybe not thinking so much, or drifting off to something else. Real meditation is sustainable, engaging, calming, effortless, and it's invigorating. It makes your blood flow. And the
Mm.
easiest way of doing that for the modern body is not to sit in a frigging chair. They do
Yeah.
enough of that, 5 to 15 hours a day.
Yeah.
Get up and move. Move in a way like simply rolling your shoulders or moving your fingers or doing something which you can keep doing for a while and make it interesting enough that you'll find it exciting,
Yeah.
but make it not too interesting it becomes stressful.
Yeah.
Make it calming enough but not too boring. And I know I have to, if it's an old person, I'll say just do this for a while, that's exciting.
Mm. Mm.
But if it's my 15-year-old kids, I'll go, no, let's do something exciting. I'll try and hit you in the face, you try and not let me hit you, like this, because they're excited by that, they're not threatened by it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have
Sure.
to be, it's a person specific thing.
Yeah. Totally.
So it's these sort of things that I think we should address, how to make the possibility of creating harmony inside ourselves, in our physical body, the thing we live in, to create this meditative place, which is like the athlete's zone, the real meditation state, a place which
Mm.
is equivalent to psychedelic drugs without needing to be addicted to drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to figure out. And I mean, that's what that's why I've been drawn to you and what I've tried to find in my own life. I mean, I can completely, just to go back to the psychedelic experiences, um, and extreme altered states. I've had my few fair share, but it was completely that. I wasn't like, oh yeah, let's do it again. It was like,
It's like
okay,
once
yeah,
is enough.
yeah,
Yes, yes,
absolutely.
yes.
And it was done
It's not
in an
go on.
environment that was nourishing and supportive, with people
Yes,
who
yeah, yeah, yeah.
were willing to
Hmm. Hmm.
to hold that space together.
Yes.
And it
M-
absolutely, and also it, when I say altered states, yes, so certain psychedelic experiences. And then, like I was saying, I remember my first ever session with you in person. I was like, I am here now, like this is, I
I
like,
remember that.
and I was like, this is the same state, of,
Mm, 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 mm.
and it's a very alert, it's very aware. When I say alert, not
Hyper
like,
alert. It's a hyper
yeah,
alert, relaxed state.
yeah,
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 with
um,
invigoration. You know, uh, I was going to say, oh, no, I have mental blank. You
yeah, yeah.
continue speaking. I
So,
was going to say something too.
and that is a state where I find that you really can make a difference. You can you can kind of analyze in a very non-attached way. You can weigh up different things without like getting too freaked out about it. and
Yes, yes,
you really can make a difference. You can, whether that's for yourself or for someone else. And it's like,
exactly.
that's what we need, man. That's what we need to change all
Yes,
these atrocities we're seeing around the world, you know. But
yes,
are
yes.
people willing to do this? It's like,
Well, sometimes they don't know the possibility is there. So what I was going to say
yeah.
before was when I was 17, I had the honor and the privilege of meeting a Tibetan Lama who sort of took me on board and taught me for a couple of years. And one of the things he said to me was when he was in Tibet, he was given various types of psychedelic drugs. The purpose was to allow him to access doorways in his brain and enter parts of his brain he otherwise couldn't have got to,
Mm,
thinking patterns, thought patterns. And so that was the purpose of the psychedelic drugs, not to keep using them, but to just find possibilities in his head that he didn't realize were there.
yeah.
So if that's what you're using it for, it's a useful thing. But many people don't realize that such a state of being here and now connected to everything is possible.
Yeah.
They're constantly living in the stress of the future, the depression of the past.
Yeah.
So one of the things that traditional cultures used to do with this was they would take, for example, DMT and mind-altering drugs for the same purpose. Every culture had their access to things like DMT and psilocybin, etc.
Mm,
But
mm,
what other cultures also did was something which the modern researchers also did. So the modern researchers of LSD in the 1960s, for example, like Stanislav Grof and other people like this, realized they can't give LSD anymore to people to be transformational as a way of changing their brain. So what they started giving was breath control exercises,
mm,
holotropic breathing, breath breathing exercises,
mm,
and of course the Kalahari Bushmen of
exactly.
South Africa. I mean, you and I were talking about this when we were there, how they go into these dance crazed states where they hyperventilate,
Yeah.
and they even some of them collapse. And obviously these states can have physical detriment for your body. And
Yeah.
certainly hyperventilation is a state of sickness. But if it allows you to enter a state in your mind, which allows you to access a doorway which you
Yeah.
hadn't seen before, which
Yeah.
you then realize is a possibility your mind could enter without any external influence like hyperventilation or drugs, then it's useful.
So here's
And I
it.
think one of the, can I finish first?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, sir. One of the things that has been the problem of modern yoga and modern exercise is to actually think that hyperventilation is good for you. And
Mm,
so many people are teaching these hyperventilation states. Many people are teaching breathe more because
mm,
it does give you a high, which
mm,
is associated with these drugs coming in your body. But that was only something which was intended to be something you do in ceremony or once a year, and
exactly.
like taking a drug
Yeah.
in ceremony once a year,
Yeah.
but not to do every day. Like you wouldn't take drugs every day. You don't want to take psychedelics every day. You don't, but to do it once in a while in the right place, just as an experience, maybe once in your life, to find the average person's way of finding this pathway, which could
Mm,
be through hyperventilation, or it could be through some ceremonial
yeah.
herb or something like that.
Yeah.
Because not everyone is able to find. I was lucky enough. I got it as my default state. My mother, bless her, thank her, she made me realize that happiness is a choice, not something you wait for.
Mm,
Be here now was the message I got early,
mm, mm.
and be connected, But
Yeah.
not everyone has it. So for some people, you need other things.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about that because you've got some beautiful stories about your parents and also your mentors and teachers. But just to wrap up, when people to think we're like, because there's a lot of this happening, we know that for sure in terms of psychedelics and altered states in the spiritual uh,
Yes.
communities, that's going on. I don't, I certainly don't advocate, you know, ayahuasca to anyone. Like this is going to make you a better human being.
No, I don't advocate any drugs for anyone. If you can get
Yeah.
away without having any drugs in your life, but be real, because most people forget that alcohol is a drug, that
Yeah,
tobacco is obviously a drug,
exactly.
that most foods are also drugs. And
Yeah,
most of the
sugar.
reason we're eating is not because of, yeah, sugar's a big one,
Yeah.
bread's sugar anyway, there is endorphin-like substances in bread and in milk, and that's why milk is addictive to kids, because it
Yeah.
stimulates endorphin receptors in the brain. So you're eating dairy products, you're eating bread, exactly the same thing. You're addicted to heroin. It's
Yeah.
almost exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most food is a drug. So people who criticize drugs might as well criticize what they're eating.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah. Yeah.
address everything that goes inside you,
That you're
especially your food. It
ingesting,
makes a big
exactly.
difference. Everything that
Um,
comes
a-
in.
and another mention. I mean, the point is that these are life life-changing experiences that shift your perspective on something. And that could be something, I mean, it can happen just walking down the road, you know, and you just have this, you know, change in your consciousness. Or it could be you go on a hike and you've never been on a hike before, or you do a handstand and you've never done a handstand before. You see a beautiful sunrise on the beach, or you do, you know, ingest psilocybin, or go on a, you know, a 5-day hike,
Yes.
you know, in the wild, whatever.
Yes.
It's just something that's shifting your perspective and making you
Yes.
see
You have to
something
shift
from
perspective.
yeah. And
Different
you
perspective.
know, you mentioned there about ceremony and what the indigenous people, the hunter-gatherer cultures, basically worldwide, you know, not just the San of Southern Africa and the indigenous cultures of Australia, you know, they were doing very, very, very similar practices. I mean, they're very much the same people, you know, that migrated out of Africa. I mean, the studies that are going on in that whole story are incredible, and it's an absolute tragedy what has happened to those people. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, and where you are, I mean, it's one of the most disgusting stories of our time, and but in that darkness, so much light can be found from it. But what I wanted to say was, you know, the San generally of Southern Africa, known as the Bushmen, um, they there's been many, many studies of whether they were ingesting psychoactive plants or not. And you know, you were mentioning their dances, and most of the time they weren't, and they were altering their states through dance and song and hyperventilation, and very, very similar practices happening in Australia. And like I said, with most hunter-gatherer cultures around the world. But those extreme states that the shamans were going into, um, were, you know, they talk about the dangers of them, and how they would only do this on very, very, very special occasions. And it is something that had been passed down for thousands of years. And that, you know, the intense states, physical repercussions of them, the bleeding from the nose, the hemorrhaging from this hyperventilation. Um, and anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But the what wanted to get to a little bit was how, unfortunately, somehow, somewhere along the lines, in all these cultures, there was a big power dynamic that resulted in a lot of dogma, that these states were only for a select few. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And then the power struggles that started to happen because of, oh no, that's, you know, sacred knowledge, and the taboo and the dogma around that.
Hmm.
And I mean, you're not talking about extreme state really in terms of your work, in terms of what I do, what you do. We're talking about something very accessible, very here, very now. Um, and
It's not that hard.
it's not that hard. Yeah.
No. Just to feel good. Yeah.
Yeah. So to uh, go back a bit, to your interesting name, and your trip on a boat, um, with your family, and with another very interesting man who was a family friend, or I think you've referred to him as your
His name was
uncle,
Basil Brown.
Basil
He was,
Brown.
he was like an uncle, yeah.
Yeah, like an
His name was
uncle.
Basil Brown, and you know, when I was 8 years old, he taught me Uddiyana Bandha and Nauli and Lauliki, which are these Indian yoga kriyas where you can control your internal organs, and you can teach it to kids. You can't teach it to adults very easily at all. But luckily, he taught me when I was 8,
Mm,
and because my father 2 years earlier had taught me how to hold my breath, because he was a free diver, I could hold my
right.
breath for long periods of time, and I still can. And so that made it possible to do these kriyas that were taught to me by this wonderful Rhodesian man, now what's Zimbabwe, is it Rhodesia, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something I carried into my teaching until now,
Mm,
and it's a
that's
very effective way of accessing different parts of your body as well.
yeah. And so, I mean, that's such a beautiful thing that you're exposed to it from such a young age, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I was
And
very lucky.
and your dad, when was he free diving in Malta, like off the island, or
Mhm,
yeah?
mhm, mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, when he was 15, he dived off a cliff to rescue a bus driver who'd crashed the bus off a cliff, and the bus driver was unconscious at the wheel. All the kids, all the school kids, got out of the bus and swam to shore, but the bus driver was left unconscious. So someone said this, and my father heard it, so he dived in the water in the winter, cold, nighttime sea, and he managed to grab this guy, pull him out. The guy had been unconscious underwater for 20 minutes.
What?
And this is amazing that he came out, he had no brain damage at all. But so on one hand, it was really amazing my father did this because it was deep water, and he got given a medal by the Queen for this, for bravery and for wonderful things like that, but also that the man actually was fine after 20 minutes underwater, unconscious, no breathing. That says that it's possible to do.
Mm,
Dolphins, which are very similar to us, can hold their breath 20 minutes. I think we can too.
mm.
You
And that,
somehow access your unconscious.
where was that, in Australia or Malta? I didn't hear
Malta,
you.
that was Malta.
So when
That's
he
Malta.
was, yeah, okay, wow.
1955 or
15.
53 it happens, yeah.
Wow. And then,
53 I think it
so
happened.
then your family got on the ship, and and Basil, wait, was he on the ship with you? I think I confused the story.
We got on this boat. I was brought up in Germany. I was born in Malta, brought up in Germany and then England. And we left Southampton at the end of 1968. And we came to Australia. And we came via South Africa,
Mm.
stopped at Cape Town, where we
Yeah, I
picked
mean,
up
there's a
Basil,
beautiful photo of
came
you
to visit Tabletop. Yes.
on the
Pick up,
cable car, right?
yes,
We should
yes,
find
yeah.
that
And we
photo.
came,
It's,
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
I couldn't remember. I
Tabletop
couldn't
Mountain.
believe when
Yeah.
I saw it.
I was amazed going back to South Africa to meet you there. That was wonderful. Brought
Yeah,
back all these memories of being eight
yeah.
years old. You know?
I mean, what a great story, eh? And
Mm,
Jim
mm.
is the link, it's so cool.
Jim was wonderful to have at Yoga Synergy. He trained with us for a while and then taught at
Mm,
our school in the 1990s. And then we didn't see him for a little bit while he went off back to South Africa.
yeah. So, okay, and then, so where did you meet Basil exactly?
In South Africa. He got on the boat at South Africa.
Okay, he got on the boat to go to
Yeah, in
Australia.
Cape Town to go to Australia.
Right.
And so I'm still, unfortunately, he died in about 1973,
Okay.
but tragically, but then I've been in touch with his wonderful kids, Andrew and Veronica, dear friends of mine till this
Oh,
day, who I still
amazing.
see.
And
And I'll probably draw them to this talk to tell so they can
yeah,
see
yeah,
it.
yeah. And he swam, right, in the
He
Olympics?
was an Olympic javelin thrower. So he was an
Oh,
athlete in the
okay,
Olympics. So
okay.
one of the things he was very good at was javelin throwing, So, but he'd been
Wow,
taught Indian yoga by many Indians who'd lived in South Africa at the time. So he knew traditional yoga techniques and was very good at them.
amazing. Because I,
He
I
taught me
also,
very well.
another thing I'm trying to wrap my head around was, I can't remember if you said if he was South African born, or where was he born?
I thought he was born in Rhodesia, but I could be
Born
wrong.
in Rhodesia, okay. Because I didn't know if he represented Rhodesia, because South Africa at that
I
time
believe he did.
was what is that word? We were boycott.
Boycotted. Yes.
We didn't.
Boycotted.
Yeah, yeah, and for good reason. But
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, so Basil, and so you go to Australia, and you're exposed to these things from a young age, but then
Mm.
what was your first trip to India?
Oh, look, that wasn't till another 15 years later. I went to India first when I was 25.
25.
But luckily, I'd had these wonderful influences. Basically, my father taught me when I was 6 how to hold my breath in to swim underwater, and he was a free diver.
Mm,
Then, when I was 8, Basil Brown taught me the internal kriyas and exhalation retention. Then, throughout my teenage years, I had this wonderful influence with the Australian bush, where I
mm,
realized that the bush was very rough, and I didn't want to hurt the bush. So it came to me that I should take off all my clothes and walk naked through the bush. And to do that in Australia is quite dodgy because if you touch any of the trees, they will cut the pieces out of you.
yeah.
So you have to, I would walk very carefully and do all these animal postures, walking through the bush, weaving in and out of the trees. And it was really great introduction to posture and movement for
Right.
me in my teenage years. And then
Mm.
right after that time, I met this Tibetan Lama when I was 17. He
Right.
introduced me to the beginnings of yoga. And then I sort of went into a foray of fitness and aerobics for a couple of years before I realized that I was doing terrible things to my joints. And around 22 again, I started doing what became Japanese yoga, and I got my first teacher training certificate in Japanese internal movement arts,
Mm.
which was a type of yoga. And then I got my first Indian yoga training, and I went to India for the first time in 1985. And I met Iyengar, and then later Patabi Joyce and Jessica Cha and many other teachers. I had an amazing teacher who I still in contact with called Professor Bimdev
Mm.
who's a guy who can stop his heartbeat, and he can take a metal bar, push it to the throat, and bend it with his throat, or he even puts a piece of steel against his eyeball and can bend the steel
Yeah.
with his eyeball with pressure from his eyeball. Incredible power,
Yeah.
amazing control of the breath. He can lie in a bed of nails and have a steamroller roll over him, and he taught me pranayama when I was in my very early 20s,
Amazing.
and I'm still in touch with him, and he had a big, profound influence in me. He was a gold medalist in the Indian yoga competitions in the early 1970s, and I even met his teacher in India at one point. He was amazing. And then, of
Incredible.
course, since then, in the early 80s and the 90s, I became a physiotherapist and studied as a physiotherapist, and studied with many other teachers, and including Aboriginal, Indigenous Australians, who were an amazing influence in me in many ways as well.
Mm.
And then finally, in the last 15 years, I've had a couple of Chinese teachers, including the teacher who I still see quite regularly is Zhenhua Yang, who is of the lineage of the last of the bodyguards of the Emperor of China.
Yeah.
And he's been an amazing influence over the last 15 years. And the last 10 years, I teach workshops with him. He came to me to learn Indian yoga. I came to him to try and learn martial arts. In the end,
Mm.
we found some sort of fusion that we sort of resonate with together. And so we teach workshops together every year. And so, but I've learned so much from him, especially on an energetic level. It's been
Mm.
wonderful because he made me understand what the traditional Indian yogis were trying to share, but somehow the modern Western mentality didn't take it. We
Mm.
took just the physical, and they were trying to offer physiological and mental and energetic, and
Mm.
we missed it. We
Something a bit
killed
more
the prana with
subtle.
overstretching
Yeah.
and over tensing and over breathing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's we could do a whole nother podcast on all these stories because I mean, you've got beautiful stories
Yeah.
about Iyengar, and I remember you
Yes.
shared those with us, and um, yeah, Master Yang, and I actually met. Do you know Velan? Have you ever a guy called Velan? I think he's actually now situated somewhere around Byron Bay.
Maybe.
Young guy. I think he's a
Maybe.
little bit older than me, and he also studies quite intensively with Master Yang, and
Oh, maybe I do. Yes, 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 I think I do.
I
Yeah.
met him
Yeah.
in Costa Rica. Um, anyway, he's an interesting guy. But
Yes. Lovely man. Yeah.
and I remember another really great story that you told us. Um, man, what is his name? I've gone blank. Anyway, but there's lots of lots of beautiful, interesting things. Um, but maybe a little bit then, like you're having all these amazing things and studying with all these different people. And I was going to say Shandor, your experiences with Shandor, Shandor
He's a
Remete as
beautiful
well.
man. Yeah, he was really
Yeah.
influential from about 1985 to, well, still I keep in touch with him, but I studied with him physically till about 2001, 2002, I
Mm.
think was the last physical practices I did with him.
Yeah, because
Amazing man.
another really beautiful connection was, I've been working with Tom Wexler a lot the
Mhm.
past 3 years, and amazing guy, teacher, and he's based in Spain, and he grew up doing capoeira, acrobatics, and shadow yoga with one of Shandor's close teachers. I forget the name, in Israel. And so I went to go study with Tom, and the first hour of the workshop was the Balakrama series, and
Prelude, yeah.
I was like, what this is what Simon's taught me though. What like,
Mm.
and there are just all these
Well,
beautiful connections, you know.
interesting, because I was studying with Shanda before he developed shadow yoga, so I don't
Right.
really know much of the shadow yoga, but we did develop things that you know, I think there was a co-evolution between what him and I were doing around
Yeah,
that time.
totally. Yeah.
So, you know, I was doing a lot of, for me, these movements of the wrists were nerve tensioning, whereas he used them also because he saw them on the cave temple walls
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
India, you know.
Yeah. And I think it comes
So
back
then
to
some of the
this,
movements look the same.
yeah, this people, you know, this understanding that people like you and who've dedicated your lives to just experiencing, understanding this thing, you know, which we
In the
all
end,
have.
the truth about it is that there's one human body, which, although it might look a bit different with skin color and might be a bit molded differently with cultural practices, in the end, there is one truth about our body. It works best in certain ways. And so the fact that different practices come to the same realizations is obvious. They have to, because we're
Yeah,
dealing with the same body. So many
exactly.
practices will go, this works best. And it works best in many systems because it's the best for the mother body.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
convergent evolutions in that way.
There we go.
Mm,
Lovely. Um,
mm.
well, that's potentially a good place to end it, even though, I mean, I know, like we said in the beginning, me and you could speak for the next, I don't know, about 5 hours. We could probably do 5 days. Um, but
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a good place. And you know, I'll put all the
Mm.
links for everyone to see what you do. And
Mm.
yeah.
Yes, if people want to contact me, they could, if you can attach some links, it's useful,
Yeah.
but otherwise, if they're not sure, they can go to one of my two websites. The one that you've mentioned already is yogasynergy.com, because I've had Yoga Synergy with my wonderful business partner, Bianca Matchless, who's also a physiotherapist and had many years in India with me as well.
Mm,
And so we've created this synergy system, which is a good adaptation of traditional yoga for the modern Western body.
mm,
And then I have another website called simonborgolivier.com, which is just my name with .com at the end of it. And in that, I teach what I call posture, movement, breathing, mental control for health, happiness, and longevity for the people who don't really know the word yoga or who don't resonate with it. And I give really simple things that don't really look necessarily like yoga, but for me, it's the basis of the same understanding
mm,
and
mm,
gives the same effect.
mm.
And with that, I have various different courses and things that people can check out, and a membership site where people can ask questions. And so if anyone writes to me, you can go to simon@simonborgolivier.com or simon@yogasynergy.com. And I'm happy to send you a set of links to some of my work, or you find my name on Facebook or Instagram, I'll send you the same thing,
Yeah.
a set of links to some postures and some
Yeah.
practices and some video links that I can give you some
Totally.
notes as well. And yeah,
Mm.
that'd be fun.
No, we'll do that. There was one
Mm.
last thing, even though we said it was nice to end it. You love dancing. You
Yes.
you love music, which is
Yes.
something we've always really enjoyed doing with sharing. And um, was dance something that instinctively, just as a child, and then through those years, those teen years, you're saying, you're walking through
Yes.
in the bush in Australia, and
Discovering crazy postures walking through the bush.
yeah.
And then when I in my late teens, I started just going to parties and started dancing. It was fun.
Mhm.
And then when I went to India to study yoga, then I also traveled on my last few days to Goa, where they were having, in the mid 80s, the dawn of what is now the trance party festival world. And we would have the most incredible dance parties where
Mm.
people would dance for 24, 36 hours non-stop. It was like running 3 or 4 marathons in one go. We just wouldn't leave the dance floor for many, many hours, 12 hours, go from sunrise to sunset or sunset to sunrise
Yeah.
past that time. And in that time, I would found I'd have to develop ways of managing energy, of
Mm.
moving in a way where it didn't destroy your energy, it nourished your energy. And this became very important in the way that I teach posture, movement, breathing now. Because
Yeah.
I don't want to give people workout. Workout is when after the workout, you're more tired, more hungry, need more sleep, and you're more exhausted and probably more pain. I want a practice, which at the end of the practice, I feel more energy, less need for sleep, less need for food, less pain.
Mm.
And that to me is called a work-in, aka yoga. But workouts, we have enough of it. It's enough,
Yeah.
we don't need to stress our life more. So this
Yeah.
I discovered really in my practice of movement. How is it if you can move in a certain way, you build energy, you don't lose it.
Mm. Mm.
As opposed to other ways you move, you go, that was exhausting. I feel
Yeah.
like lying down now.
Yeah.
That
Exactly.
took thousands of hours of dancing.
Yeah. We go.
And I believe many people criticize dance. I go to yoga workshops around the world and people say, you're not going to do any of that dancing stuff. That's not real yoga. And I go, well, Nataraj means the king of the dancers. That was Shiva. His other name was the king of the yogis.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't it true? So,
Exactly. Exactly. It's really that simple.
so the same,
There we
that's
go.
simple,
And there he
exactly.
is. There he is
Yeah.
on your t-shirt there.
Yes, on my t-shirt,
There.
Nataraj, Shiva.
The
There you go.
Mahayogi. Wonderful.
Mahayogi, yes, yes, yes.
Simon, I do
Bless
miss
you,
you,
Dave.
but you truly, I every day, every time I move and meditate, and when I share, everyone knows how much I speak of you, and I encourage anyone to study with you if they can, and even if it's something
Thank you very
online.
much.
Um,
Well, we have lots of online stuff, and we have lots of live training as well when the live training becomes legal again.
right.
And I would love to see people coming. It was a pleasure to have you for a month, and it's one of the most fun things I do is conduct these trainings where we have
Yeah.
like pretty much 6 hours of something physical every day, but it's sustainable physical.
Yeah.
It's stuff which people can do it and they just relish it, and it's really
It's
fun.
beautiful.
So
It's really
we're
powerful.
doing an online teacher training now, actually, if anyone's interested. If
Mm.
anyone happens to see this, we're starting one now, and it's our first one fully online, but it's the best we can offer at this stage.
Yeah, I would highly encourage. For me, the base of my practice, I'm doing obviously a lot of other stuff, rolling around on the ground and into
I love
acrobatics
what you do.
and moving with other people, and I love it because it's fun and it's interesting and it's engaging, and it's not really exhausting for me, um and it's not for any kind of, I just love it. But the base of my
It's fun.
practice, and this is what I've been trying to tell people, is something that is sustainable and something that I do every day, which is a combination of things that I've learned from you and Jim and all the other teachers I've studied with. But obviously, the things that I've learned from you are, it's priceless. It's timeless. And
If
I'm
it's
very grateful.
fun and you're doing it, then you're engaged and you're passionate. By making something enjoyable, then you're passionate about it. If
Mm,
you're passionate about it, then you're in love with it. And when you're in love, you're conscious. And when you're conscious and you're in love and you're having that feeling inside your body, you want to share it. Then
yeah,
we can all share good energy and loving information. Because when you're in love inside your body, energy flows very easily. And then you have this good energy and loving information flowing, and you can share it so easily with other people.
that's it.
That's why I believe enjoy your life, look after your body, help other people enjoy their lives.
Beautiful.
Seems to work.
Well, Simon, thank you. I look forward to moving under a giant. I couldn't remember if it was a fig tree, but that video you posted a few weeks back,
Yeah,
and
that
we
was good
will.
on my birthday.
Wonderful. We'll have a good time together. But this was great. It was
Thank
better
you.
than,
Really nice to talk to you again. Thank you
yeah,
very much.
yeah.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you everyone for watching and listening. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dave. Bless you.